Hey guys, I want to talk about the endgame damage scaling for minions. Now the argument is that the cost to min-max minion damage is not proportional to the amount of effort and currency you put into building the build versus the amount of damage and performance that you receive. So in this video, I'm going to go over 0.2 versus 0.3 minions, and then we're going to look at my friend Yashin's 4 to 5 mirror build and just how much damage that he has. And then we're going to go look at the good old 0.1. Now for 0.3, they did do a lot of good stuff, right? There's a lot of good improvements that we got. We got the weapon swap lock, multiple supports, you know, increases in damage across the board. But they also changed how like reservation works. But how it plays for 0.3 is actually really good. The minions play really well. My only complaint, right from my original wish list, is that the end game damage scaling is still not there. So we're gonna go into that. So I waited a while to do this video because I needed like tip-top gear to like really show how much effort and how much like investment and currency you have to put in. So this is the gear. We're using a +5 scepter. I'm actually borrowing this from a friend. A lot of this stuff for this video is borrowed. The amulet, it's only a +3. But here it's not here nor there. The big things are the +5 on the scepter for the sanctification is going to be the big one. A +1 minion helmet, you know, that's kind of run of the mill. You can kind of get it. But all this gear altogether is super expensive. It's over a mirror in gear, right? I finally got my hands on one of these guys too. It's the +3 Prism of Belief for spectres. I've been grinding, trading Undying Hates, doing that constantly, and I managed to get one. This guy cost 700 divines for me. So bless his soul, the guy who sold it for me for 700 divines. If we want to take a look at the price, these are the costs for Prism of Belief diamonds right now, as is. 760. So I kind of lucked out. I talked to the dude who was selling it. He sold it for 706. So, you know, a little bit of a discount, which is really nice. So what I want to do to show off the differences between 0.2 and 0.3 minions is actually the elite Death Knight. I have a video of an elite Death Knight fighting Zesht, right? And keep in mind that the pinnacle bosses for 0.3, they only go to T3. So we can kind of have to infer how good the damage is by looking at the 0.2 Death Knights and kind of cutting off the damage at 15 million. So we'll take a look at that. For this comparison between 0.2 and 0.3, I wanted to use Death Knights because for one, I had a Death Knight video for 0.2, which is what we're about to see. And in 0.2, I also had a Prism of Belief. These guys were level 37. I had double ever grasping rings, and I was basically pumping their damage as high as I could, like juicing it to the gills. So we'll watch this right now. You'll see how long it takes to kill this T4 Zesht, right? But keep in mind that in 0.3, there's no T4 anymore. There's only T3s. And the maximum life in a T3 is 15 million. So in this video, to get to 15 million, it's about 7 seconds. Takes 7 seconds to get to 15 million. So we'll stop it right there, right? Keep that in mind. So what were the improvements that we got in 0.3? Okay, so this is my setup for 0.3 for Death Knights. I have, again, 7 of them. Now, right, we got muster, multiple supports going on. They had buffs to quality, increasing more damage. So, and on top of that, we also have rage now, right? So I have all these things added into my Death Knights. And then this is only a T3 Zesh, so we'll take it as if, you know, we'll have to estimate the damage based on how much damage is done in that same time frame. It takes about 4 seconds for these guys to kill. Right, chunks, pretty good. Right, not bad, looks really respectable. And it's about the same time too for ants. Ants and Death Knights are roughly really close to each other in terms of damage. So if you're looking at this, you might think like, oh wow, you know, it's pretty good damage. But you got to keep in mind and remember, right, I have a Prism of Belief, which is 700 divines, a +5 scepter, which is like, who knows, another 300, something like that. I'm borrowing that from a friend. So, right, like I said in the very beginning, is the amount of currency invested to where your damage needs to be, does it reflect properly in that ratio of like how much effort it takes to get that much damage? And I don't think so. There's no way. And even then, right, I always rewind this back to what Mark Roberts said. At some point, your build should feel powerful. And if you watch this, you would think like, oh yeah, it feels pretty powerful. And yeah, you'd be right, you know, for these T3 pinnacle bosses, it does feel pretty good. Mapping feels pretty good as long as you're not doing like the hardest content, which is like abyss content with hits that become more difficult as they close on top of stacked delirium in a 6-person party, right? That's when you feel that kind of difficulty scale up. And it's like that for a lot of classes too. But then some classes with this same amount of investment, right, the meta builds, it's just like completely in another world, right? In another league. And the thing with minions too is that they don't have directed damage, so you know, but they're definitely in need of a buff. So I want to show you guys next, right, what a 4 to 5 mirror build looks like on an empowered boss, which is technically the most damaging type of content that you could do, is empowered bosses with souls and stuff like that. The clip we're about to watch is from the Farmers event this past weekend, the Boss Bash Bonanza, and my friend Yashin is participating, and he's got the most incredible set of minion gear. He's got a +5 scepter, all T1 mods, you know, +4 sanctified amulet, +1 minion helmet, 14 KES, maximum resistances, you know, the works. Pretty much as much investment and min-maxing that you could do. And he's using ants in combination with Deathknights, which is a good segue to show, because we just saw the Deathknights that I was using, right? To do T3 Zesh, killed them in 4 seconds. But when you're doing the highest, like, basically the highest tier content, which is mapping now, right? Empowered bosses with these mods, abysses become more difficult as they close. And once again, that's also the most rewarding, like, kind of arguably the most rewarding content, right? Because T4 Pinnacle bossing, with the exception of the Arbiter dropping like a Prism of Belief, there's not really much that you get. So if you look at the damage that you're getting, right, for 4 to 5 mirrors of investment, it's really not there. And I always think back to what Mark Roberts said. He always says at some point in time your build should feel powerful. And as far as minion goes, if you're doing any, you know, thing that's like not juiced, you feel super strong. It feels great, but then it starts to just like level off, and there's not much improvement once you hit a certain amount of minion levels, because there's not many ways to scale your damage anymore, right? In 0.1, that I think was the best use of damage that we got, because it was high investment. You had to really invest in and hit like you know, that level 40 minions. We scaled a lot of damage with crit damage using Eye of Winter. There was a lot of jewel sockets, so you had a lot of options for scaling damage, and it felt pretty good. It felt like, you know, you had a way to actually build damage. So we're going to look at some 0.1 stuff right now. So before we look at 0.1, let's take a look at Yashin's gear, right? This 4 to 5 mirrors worth of investment, right? The +5 scepter, really nice, you know, perfect rolls, basically everything you could ever want for in a scepter. During his event, he was actually using double ever graspings. So this is like kind of his mapping set, right? +1 minion helmet with reservation of skills. So this one is part of his mapping set. It's got rarity on it. It's not the full like 14 KES. Triple socketed focus, you know, faster start of energy shield, recharge time. Just really nice sets of gear. Triple socketed boots. Basically everything you could ever want. All right, the +3 Prism of Belief, a good megalomaniac with two good skills. So really nice gear, and it's just that for that amount of investment, what reflects that you get for damage, it's not there for endgame damage scaling. You know, it's just not. Like, hopefully we get some other ways of scaling damage in the future, because obviously the game's not complete yet, right? They're still kind of tuning in the damage, adjusting the difficulty of the end game. For this season, the end game has been really easy, other than the fact that if you're doing empowered bosses and abysses with certain mods. But bar all of that, right, it's the amount of investment that you put in should reflect with feeling powerful and how much damage that you get. It would be a different story if this was like, you know, 100 divines worth of gear, but this is like multi-mirror 4 to 5, right? So let's go take a look at 0.1. So let's take a look at 0.1 damage, right? This is T4 Zesh, just all snipers on an infernalist. But back in 0.1, right, minions actually had really good damage scaling per level. They weren't nerfed. We had a lot of sockets. Quality on the scepter gave spirit. There was a lot of like really good things that minions had that all got nerfed. And then on top of that, we also had the ability to stack critical weakness with Eye of Winter. So, right, that's T4 Zesh. T4 Zesh in 3 hits, right? That's 30 million DPS. The investment in my gear in 0.1 was around 400 to 450 divines, and that's a lot. That's still a lot. It's not, you know, a mirror it's not 4 mirrors, you know, but like it's still a lot. The average player does not make, you know, that many divines. So there needs to be this gap that gets bridged per damage that you receive and the payoff that you get for how much investment that you put in. So what you're about to see now is Reavers. This is Reavers in 0.1, right? On Arbiter. T4 Arbiter. Or whatever the highest tier of Arbiter was, right? So this is with Reavers, right? Just going to town. Like really good damage. And it felt really good because you actually felt powerful. Your minions felt powerful. You know, they were doing really good damage. You could farm all these things. You could skip phases and all that kind of stuff. You could skip mechanics. So hopefully we get some type of you know, benefits later on in the future leagues. I want to touch on gear too. So the one thing with minions, or if you want to max out your damage, you basically have to use these ever-grasping rings. Like, it doesn't matter if you're an infernalist or whatever. Yeah, sure, you know, you got spirit on your rings with Vener's Gambles. The problem is these things give 30% extra chaos damage. That's a lot. That's a gain. So two of these together is 60%. Now the downside, right, because we have this special belt now, right, whichever belt you're using, whether you want to use the Darkness Enthroned or if you're trying to use like Rage, it makes it really, really hard to maximize your resistances. Like if I put these rings in, right, this is separate from my mapping set. Look at my resistances. 34 cold, 22 lightning. So once again, it's like if you really want the maximum damage and you want to really scale your character, there's not many ways to do it. And if you're using uniques just like this, the investment just shoots through the roof because now you're looking for T1 resistances on all your gear, you know, triple T1 boots, triple T1 on the chest, like just like you're looking for this like really, really nice, very niche sets of gear. If you want to run like, you know, maximum damage essentially, if you really want your character to feel powerful and you want to have this kind of stuff, there's this huge trade-off because the suffixes and not having, you know, this like blanket of choices that you got to choose for affixes on your gear. So that's a story for another time, for another video, when it comes to like the crafting and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so minions definitely need help in the endgame damage scaling department, right? As we've seen, the amount of investment that you put in, it definitely does not reflect how much power that you get, especially after looking at 0.1, right? 0.1 was like the best. And it wasn't like the damage was free either. You actually had to farm up the +5 scepter, you know, the +3 trench timber, all that kind of stuff. It was not free. You had to farm that up. And eventually, at some point, your build did feel powerful. It's just like what Mark Roberts said, and I always go back to that just because, you know, for 0.3, what we have now, what you just saw, multi-mirror build, there's not much ways to scale damage. All you've got is minion levels. We don't have the jewel sockets anymore. We don't have the ability to put crit weakness to, you know, exploit critical hits on minions. And I know they wanted to take that away because it felt too strong and everyone was doing it, but hopefully we get, you know, some other replacement. As far as solutions go for this, I'm sure GGG is working on something just because they have a ton of irons in the fire. Totally understand, right? You got the PoB1 League, you got the Druid, you've got these other acts, you've got the other Ascendancy classes. And they've done a good job, in my opinion, for 0.3. They've added in all this stuff that makes the minion builds feel really good. And there are other problems, obviously, that I didn't address. People still, you know, we still have body blocking, convocation, the idea that, you know, some people don't like active commands and that kind of stuff. But as far as where they're going with minions, I think it's good. I'm having a blast this league. I'm still playing it, still farming, seeing what we can get. But yeah. Hopefully you guys like the video. You know, you agree, disagree. I'm really hoping that we get some type of damage back at the very, very end game damage scaling. Peace out. Catch you guys on the next one. Bye.